Game over, man. Game over. Johnny.
You're gonna need a bigger boat.
Why so serious?
I am Iron Man. This is a tasty burger.
Welcome to the In Session Film Podcast.
Welcome to episode 564 for December 11th, 2023, and I'm JD Duran.
And I'm Brendan Cassidy.
Hey, thanks for joining us, everybody, for this episode, as award season is in full swing at the moment.
Everybody be globetrotting today.
Absolutely. The nominations for the Golden Globes were announced this morning. We are, of course, going to talk about them. And spoiler alert, this year, it wasn't a complete dumpster fire.
I mean, you want to go further than that and say it wasn't even a dumpster fire at all?
Yeah, exactly. No, they surprised in many ways. We'll get into it, but
Yeah.
my goodness, they pulled some strings. They seemed as if they were a completely different Golden Globes. That's because they are.
I was going to say, you're getting a little ahead of yourself. Kind of were. A little bit of a different voting body this time around.
Yeah, so we'll get into that, of course. So much to talk about with the Globes and maybe how it'll affect the Oscars going forward.
Mm-hmm.
And then we're going to round the show with WONKA coming out in theaters this weekend.
Yeah.
Movie that I've seen.
Same.
It has some interesting, some compelling, some might even say musical numbers in it. We are going to talk about some of the best musicals of all time. And we're going to do it similarly to what we did last week with our Nicolas Cage character draft. We're going to have a movie musical draft.
We're doing another draft. Another draft. We should probably not do another one because we don't want to be known as the Movie Draft Podcast. That already exists. We don't want to steal their thunder.
Yeah, no, we're not going to do that exclusively, but I thought it would be fun to regurgitate that.
That was a fun time. Yeah, doing that with Nicolas Cage. Yeah.
Yeah, it was really fun. So we'll do some musical drafting, and we'll get to that in the back half of the episode.
Yeah.
I do want to say, though, before we get into it, a big thank you to all of our patrons. I tend to do this at the end of the show. I really should do it here at the beginning. Yes, thank you to everyone who supports us on Patreon. That's patreon.com/InSessionFilm. Thank you to those who support us there. We have weekly content that is exclusive to our patrons. So if you want to check that out, again, patreon.com/InSessionFilm. And I want to note that on this week's show, Brendan and I, we spent some good time talking about Hayao Miyazaki's The Boy and the Heron, which ended up #1 at the box office, which was a first for Hayao Miyazaki. So if you want to check that out, please support us there on Patreon.
Yes.
Also, real quick, before we get into the Globes, Brendan.
Okay.
Last week, I had a video go out here on the channel. If you're watching us here on YouTube, that I wanted
Lewin.
to
Yeah,
note.
Lewin, what you up to now?
Because last Wednesday, Inside Llewyn Davis celebrated its 10th anniversary.
Gosh, we're old.
Which is hard for me to wrap my mind around. That film, when it first came out, I remember vividly that first viewing experience. I remember what the next few weeks were like as I continued to sit on that film and I listened to the soundtrack incessantly and just fell in love with that movie. That was 10 years ago. It's crazy. So to celebrate its 10th anniversary, I did put out a video essay simply talking about why I think it's a masterpiece, and that is up right now. It's available on our YouTube channel.
It's a great video,
If you
man.
want to go and check that out. Thank you. Thank you. Really do appreciate that. Brendan and I also did a pretty lengthy podcast review of it on episode 518. If anyone wants to go and check that out. From earlier this year, we did a 2013 retrospective.
Yeah, we did.
And that was a ton of fun. So
movie
that
holds
is
up.
also available.
Great movie. And
Great movie.
to think that it's 10 years old and
10 years.
weirdly, I guess, predicted the idea of Kylo Ren and Poe Dameron in outer space together singing "Please, Mr. Kennedy."
Pretty insane. Yeah,
I watched that movie in preparation for that episode earlier this year for that 2013 retrospective, as you talked about. I rewatched that with my now wife, and when that musical number came on, or that performance rather came on, she was so transfixed. She was like, "What is this?"
I
like it. I don't know if I'm supposed to like it, but I like it.
Yeah, it's amazing. No, it's one of the best scenes of not just 2013, but really that entire decade.
That's a Coen Brothers all-timer right there, man. It really
amazing. It's so good. I could watch that on a loop and never stop smiling. It is so funny, so charming.
We should do a Coen Brothers series someday. We really should.
We really do. We really do. But yeah, we've talked about that film so many times throughout.
Oh yeah, we'd have to skip that movie because there already is an extensive review of that. We can't do it again.
For sure. But you know, I love Inside Llewyn Davis. It's one of my favorite films of all time, which I speak to in the video.
Yeah.
Again, if you want to go and check that out, or episode 518, where Brendan and I go pretty in depth on it together. But yeah, I just wanted to note, since that film just celebrated its 10th anniversary, a little self-promotion there.
Gotta love it.
All right. Let's transition over to the Golden Globe nominations that took place this morning as we are recording. And I think we can start a little broad here, Brendan. I will note, though, before tossing it over to you to get your thoughts, the tally for the nominations this morning. I won't go through every one of them, but leading the pack was Barbie with 9 nominations, Oppenheimer with 8, Killers of the Flower Moon with 7, Poor Things with 7, Past Lives with 5 nominations. We'll get more into that, I'm sure. Maestro, May December, Anatomy of a Fall, all with 4 nominations as well. So much to talk about here, Brennan. So I know we somewhat foreshadowed it there at the beginning of the episode, but tell me, what are your overall thoughts, surprises? What do you think of this year's crop of Golden Globe nominees here?
They look more like Oscar nominations.
Like they really, right?
They really do. And we already alluded to this, the fact that there is a new voting body that we'll certainly talk about here that has made some different interpretations on what they want to vote for and see represented here. But
for context, the old voting group only makes up about a third of the total group now.
Right.
So like we saw with the Academy in 2016, immediately the nominations we're seeing here is indicative of those changes.
Absolutely. Yeah. And we're definitely seeing that on display given what's been nominated here. Like I said, they do look a lot more like Oscar nominations. And this is no discredit to the Golden Globes. I actually really like the ceremony. Every time the Golden Globes airs, I actually have a lot of fun watching it.
Yeah.
And it's primarily because it's a party. You know, it's the time that the
little
the
looser.
stars, well, they can drink, right? So they don't have to wait till the after parties.
Yeah.
But given that context, and also the fact that the Golden Globes equally nominate television as they do film simultaneously in the same ceremony, there is this perception that the Golden Globes are a bit more, I guess, populist, if that makes sense. It's not always the case, but there is that lingering perception where there's more of an artistic variety when it comes to the Oscar nominations. But we got a lot of artistic variety here with the Golden Globe nominees. This is probably some of the best. This is the best crop of nominees I think we've seen in a long time. I really do think it's that good. I don't have many complaints here. There are a few things we can talk about that are a bit wonky that they may have chosen to nominate over others, but let's at least talk about some of the biggest surprises here that we were very happy with. We alluded to this very loosely during our Patreon episode leading up to this episode, but The Boy and the Heron getting some good love, not just for Best Animated Film, which we expected to see, but Joe Hisaishi, baby. Joe Hisaishi.
He finally gets it. His first major Western Awards nomination.
I know.
Which is insane.
That's amazing. That's amazing.
That whole lineup, it was the first thing I had to tweet about when I saw the nominations this morning.
Yeah.
That whole lineup from top to bottom is excellent. And
It
is not usually the case. Whether you're talking about the Globes and even the Oscars, we've talked about this so many times here on the show. It's always been my biggest complaint is that I don't know how seriously these awards groups take the music categories. And my solution, maybe half sarcastically, has been give it to the people.
Give it to
me because Best Original Score is my favorite category.
Yeah.
I will take it seriously and I will absolutely get it right. Whereas I feel like the voting members historically with the Academy, or in this case, we're talking about the Globes, it's as if they nominate composers they know or films they know, something that feels safe and
like another John Williams nomination here again. It's probably warranted, but at the same time, he's in the club, right?
Yeah.
So it's easy.
This is the first time, maybe ever. I can't say that conclusively because obviously I'm not a Golden Globes expert.
Yeah,
but certainly in my lifetime, and certainly within the context of the lifespan of In Session Film, this is the best crop of nominees we've had for Best Original Score.
I agree.
It is terrific. Now, there are certainly a couple of other scores that could be contenders, but all 6 of them are more than worthy of being here.
I agree.
Terrific. Absolutely terrific.
I just love seeing Joe Hisaishi's name in there. I love, and I think that's the thing that most surprised me. And maybe I shouldn't even say surprise me, because given this new voting body that we already talked about, I kind of knew that it was going to be more representative of all types of films between all backgrounds, right?
Yeah.
And the fact that we got a lot of love for foreign language films, some of them even making it all the way in to Best Picture Drama, right? I'd say the one nominee that surprised me the most, and this is, I hate to say this because I hate saying that an awards nominee makes me appreciate a film more just because it gets nominated for something.
Yeah.
But I gotta say, seeing Alma Poitsi get nominated for Best Actress for Fallen Leaves, it's making me love that movie even more. And I already really liked it quite a bit. So, and her reaction is so sweet and sincere.
It's so charming.
Yeah. But yeah, that might be the nominee that surprised me the most, that I also think was one of the most welcoming. And then a lot for Celine's Song for Past Lives. That did very well. And there's a lot more we can talk about, I'm sure, but that's the initial response that I had to these.
No, you're absolutely right. I saw the stat earlier that there were 13 nominations for non-English language films outside of the non-English language category.
Right.
I don't know if that's a record, but it certainly seems like it's the case.
That's a number. That's a number right there.
It's a big number. And yeah, I have to echo a lot of what you're saying. Overall, while there are some misses, some disappointments, there's always going to be snubs for sure. But on the whole, collectively, especially comparatively to the past 10, 15 years, this crop of nominees is excellent.
It's really good.
Very, very good. And coming out of the gate with this new voting body, which I do think is important here, right? Because the Golden Globes a few years ago had become utterly irrelevant, right?
Yeah.
They were taken off TV. No one seemed to give a damn. They were fizzling out of the awards conversation altogether.
Sure.
And then the Hollywood Foreign Press made some changes.
Yeah.
They tried to, they tried to revamp their image. And much like what the Oscars did in 2016, they added some diversity to the group, which is why they were canceled in the first place.
Yeah.
And while there's probably some growth to still be had on that front,
Oh, I have thoughts on one thing. Yeah, we'll get to that in a little bit.
yeah, it's not perfect. Do not get me wrong. There's
Yeah.
still some ways to go there.
Yeah.
However, the changes they've made coming into this year's crop of nominees, I do think the stakes were a little high for the HFPA, because if they swung and missed here, even with those changes, I don't know if they would have ever have climbed back to the relevancy that they held previously.
Yeah.
But they did hit.
They
They
did.
hit in a big way.
did
Again,
good.
still more changes are needed. Got to keep climbing your way through all of the hole that they had dug for themselves the last 100 years. So they still have a ways to go. However, this is a really impressive start with this new voting body.
Yeah.
Because I'm with you. I mean, the overall crop of nominations are really excellent.
Yeah.
To your point, they almost look like Oscar nominations. When we do get to Oscar nomination morning, it would not surprise me if most of the categories there are this -1, because there are 6 nominees in each of these categories.
It'll get weirder when it comes to some of the leading actor and actress categories because of the
'cause
split
it's
between
still
drama.
split,
And, but to your point, there'll most likely be some consolidation of those existing nominees as we see here.
Exactly. And the Globes hasn't always been that. They've always been a little weird, and they've had these oddball picks, and that's part of the charm for sure. But I do love how things seem to be changing for the better. Now, the color purple missing is one of the big ones. I don't know how we got there.
Do you think it's just coming out too late?
That could be the case. I've seen that argument that it's just coming out a little bit too late. Maybe that's why Ferrari had absolutely no impact on any of this either. 'Cause
Yeah.
those films are coming out on Christmas.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
maybe they just came out too late. I don't know. I don't think the color purple will miss at the Oscars.
Oh, I don't think so either. And given the early word of mouth for that film, I think it's going to be a hit with those voting members for sure.
Yeah. The other thing, I don't think The Holdovers misses in screenplay with the Academy either. And that was the other big one.
That's more of an
here.
Academy film than it is a Hollywood Foreign
It
Press film.
is. I agree, because it's such an American movie. It's quintessential 70s United States.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I can see why that didn't play to the HFPA as much as it will to the Academy, for sure.
Yeah.
So there are a few things that won't translate, but I think on the whole, when I look at Best Picture Drama or Best Picture Comedy Musical, could this end up being the 10 that we see at the Oscars?
Give or take.
I
think at the very
so,
least between both of those categories, I think you have maybe 7 or 8 of the Best Picture nominees at the Oscars. Yeah.
I don't think Air gets in. That's
that will not
comedy musical.
It's sad because you notice it's always Best Picture Drama at the Globes as opposed to Best Picture Musical or Comedy. That's more representative of the Oscar nominations for Best Picture.
Yeah. The comedy or musical tends to miss a lot more.
Yeah, well, and I think there's too many gray areas as to what defines a comedy these days. So sometimes you're filling that quota with some actual comedy that's probably never going to get any Oscar love. But then you've got some of these gray areas like May, December, for instance, that there's been a lot of debate as to whether that should be in comedy or drama. I'm actually kind of proud that it's in comedy, if I'm being honest.
Yeah. Look,
I don't know if I agree with that, but I'm proud that it's there.
Look, it is a melodrama first and foremost, but I do think at times that film is blisteringly funny.
I agree.
And I understand why they would put it there, especially when you look at the drama category and it's deep. I don't know if I would have removed any of those except for maybe Maestro. I can't say it any other way than that after watching the Bradley Cooper
Maestro.
In my head, every time I see it, it's her uttering the word that way, Maestro. But at any
Oh,
rate,
Emma.
and
Oh,
I
Emma.
will probably say that throughout the rest of the show unintentionally, just because
Every time you have to say maestro.
maestro. I would maybe, I think you could remove that for something else. But that, again, when it comes to award season, people do really like that film. It's going to hit at the Oscars for sure. So
Yeah.
I think those, at least 5 of those 6 are there. Past Lives is the question mark when it comes to drama. I don't know if that'll translate over to the Oscars. I really hope it does. But with comedy or musical,
Yeah.
Barbie and Poor Things are locks. Well,
Yeah.
I would assume they're locks anyway.
Same here.
The Holdovers probably. I think that's pretty close. May, December, to your point though, Brennan, is the one that's like, yeah, it's funny. It probably should be more in the drama, but given how deep that category is, hey, let's just throw that into comedy instead.
Yeah.
I understand that move, but I don't know when it comes to the Academy if that's one they're going to embrace. We'll see, but I don't know.
I think May, December will be one of those films when it comes to Oscar season that's more celebrated for its performances and maybe its screenplay. But doesn't get a Best Picture nomination. Now going back to something you said, I'm only basing this off of a hunch. I have no statistical evidence to support what I'm about to say here, but I do genuinely think Past Lives is getting a Best Picture nomination at the Oscars. I do think it is.
Yeah, I could see the 6 in drama plus Barbie and Poor Things, so that gets us to 8.
Mm-hmm.
The Holdovers, that gets us to 9. And then from there, I think it's a little bit of a question mark. Because May, December. But American Fiction is not going to get there, sadly. And
do you think it could?
I don't think it's there.
Do you think it could be another one of those cases where maybe they'll sneak an animated movie in there?
Maybe, like Spider-Man, for example.
Yeah. Or The Boy and the Heron.
Boy and the Heron.
I don't know if that'll happen.
I don't think it'll get that far.
Yeah.
I would personally, I'd love to see Wes Anderson, but that's not going to happen either.
No, sadly, I think all those voting bodies forgot about Asteroid City already.
I know. It's really disappointing.
Sad. It's a good movie.
It is. So my other question, I guess, when it comes to what that 10th film could be, could it be Anatomy of a Fall? Because there's a lot of love for Sandra Hüller and her performance there.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe the writing of that film, if it gets a screenplay nomination, could that be in there? Or what about All of Us Strangers? I think is a potential player as well.
Again, that could, it is kind of high concept a little bit, so maybe that could be another one that's more represented as a screenplay and acting awards player. I don't know. There's also the Zone of Interest, which could be a potential one as well. Like you can nominate like 15 movies for Best Picture this year, and they all seem to make sense, right?
Yeah, I agree. Well, the Zone of Interest is in the drama, so that was included in the 9.
Oh, that was, so you were already okay. You were already considering that. Okay,
so gotcha. I was considering the 6 in drama plus Barbie and Poor Things. That gets us to 8. The Holdovers at 9, assuming that is a Best Picture nominee. Yeah. So then, what fills that last slot?
Okay, gotcha.
Is essentially where I was going with that. And at this point, it feels like maybe an Anatomy of a Fall or an All of Us Strangers.
Well, Anatomy, I guess that's why I got confused, because Anatomy of a Fall is nominated for Best Picture at the Globes.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Yes. Yeah. So then.
Oh yeah. I totally.
Yeah. So including that. Yeah. So
that's my bad. I totally overlooked that.
Okay. So more good news. Did you know that Anatomy of a Fall was nominated for Best Picture?
Look at that. How exciting. Never mind. We can just erase the last 2 minutes of this episode. Yeah. So then maybe it's an All of Us Strangers. Maybe that's the last one that slips in there.
Maybe. Yeah.
Or May, December. Maybe it is May, December. Maybe it is
May, December. I don't know. Or maybe this is where they pick something that the Globes neglected. Maybe that's where the color purple comes into play.
The color purple, honestly, that's it. That's the answer. I feel like it's going to be the color purple.
It's got to be the answer. I don't see Ferrari being that one. I'd see that maybe more of a technical representation, mostly because Michael Mann films don't always hit with voting bodies right away. They tend to get rediscovered with time, which is what I love so much about Michael Mann.
And that film is going to disappoint a lot of people, I think.
I think so too. Yeah.
I mean, it already kind of has with its festival response, I guess. But I think even when it comes to the voting members and especially the general audience, I think people will be disappointed, but the Michael Mann of it all. It's Michael Mann fans, get ready because you're going to love it.
Going down the manhole once again.
Going down the manhole.
Yeah. So, and looking at this, I guess we'll talk about maybe a few snubs, things that we were a little bit, I hate to say disappointed because this is such a good representation of nominees this year for the Globes, right? I will say the biggest thing that I was a little bit upset about was no love for Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret, especially for Rachel McAdams' performance.
Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah. If there's one thing about these nominees that gives me a little bit of like pause in the way that the Globes usually do for me, it's this stinking cinematic box office award of the year.
The memes coming out of it have been pretty hilarious, though.
I will say, if whoever is presenting that award at the ceremony, if they get up there with their envelope, they pull the envelope out and they show it to everyone, and it actually says Barbenheimer, that'll be I will. That
would be great.
That would be great.
That would be great.
Yeah,
I think that category is mostly there to recognize. Again, I'm maybe stretching here a little bit. I don't even know if they've spoken to this. There might be a reasoning that they've given that I'm just unaware of. But maybe they simply want to recognize John Wick in some ways, or the Barbenheimer of it all, given how significant that was to cinema this year. Or maybe more superficially, we want to get Taylor Swift to the Golden Globes.
This is her step to become president, I guess.
Like, I'm just trying to put that out there. I don't know.
Yeah.
But I agree.
Yeah. Don't they usually do this award during the breaks? I can't recall if they've ever.
I don't know.
For those of you listening, maybe correct me if I'm wrong on this, but I can't recall if they actually present this award live. I think I remember this one being announced during the breaks. Maybe I'm wrong on that. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know either. But it's certainly not a category I'm all that concerned about, but I do agree that it is futile for sure.
Yeah. Yeah.
One nomination that I wanted to bring up. So earlier you talked about how the Globes tends to give us these fun surprises. However, this year the nominees look more like Oscar noms than giving us these weird oddball choices.
Yeah.
However, there was the surprise you mentioned earlier for Fallen Leaves and Alma Hoisty, and her reaction is great. She's very fun in that film. Love that nominee. The most surprising, the most Golden Globe nominee of the morning, and it's not even close, is Joaquin Phoenix for Beau is Afraid.
Loved it.
That is a nomination that no one saw coming.
And I say this as someone who hasn't even watched Beau is Afraid yet. I love seeing him there. You would expect if he's going to get nominated, it would probably be for Napoleon.
Well, and that to me is the fun irony of it, right? Because he's nominated for Best Actor in Comedy or Musical, and there is humor to be had in Beau is Afraid. But he's much funnier in Napoleon, the Ridley Scott epic biopic.
I've heard that. I've heard people say that.
I don't know if Ridley Scott intended on the film or his performance being that hilarious, but it is, accidentally or not, it is pretty funny and certainly more humorous than Beau is Afraid. So they could have gone with the Napoleon choice, which maybe would have been more of an awardsy thing to do, but
again, I have not seen Beau is Afraid to make the proper comparison between the two, but the fact that you don't nominate the performance in comedy, and it's the one that says Destiny bought me this lamb chop, you don't nominate that one for comedy, I feel like something's wrong.
Because you have boats. Look, it's so that should be the performance they nominated. I just want that on the record. Napoleon is very funny.
The more
and Joaquin Phoenix is hysterical.
The more we talk about Napoleon, the more I'm really itching to see this 4-hour cut. Because I think there's a potentially great movie in there.
I agree. I completely agree. But yes, Joaquin Phoenix for Beau is Afraid is still a very Globesy nomination that I did appreciate. And I still like him in that film. I probably like that film on the whole more than a lot of other people do. But that was fun. That was really fun to see. Did not expect. No one, if you told me that you jotted that down, I don't believe you. There's no one on the planet Earth that predicted that. Okay? Let's just go ahead and
that's just hilarious.
Put that to bed now. But you know, there's some other fun ones like Matt Damon gets nominated here for Air.
Yeah.
You know, that again, only in a Globes context will he get nominated there. But that's again just one of those. He's not really in the conversation that's award season. So to see a name like that pop up, it's just interesting to me. The one that I hope does translate, and I'm afraid that it won't when it comes to the Oscars, is Jeffrey Wright. So he gets in for American Fiction. And I think it is one of his best performances in recent years, especially. We'll talk about it later on this week. He's very, very good in American Fiction. Yeah. And probably could be in. I will say this because I don't want to get into too much trouble. There is an actor that is going to get in to the Oscars for Best Actor that I am not all that high on. Now, I'm not saying this to be contrarian or to say that I'm right and you're wrong.
Is this individual nominated at the Globes?
Yes.
Okay. I think I know who you're talking about, but I won't say it out loud.
Yes, he is. I guess I say this to say that if I had a vote, I would take this person out and I would put in Jeffrey Wright because I think there's going to be an argument. And I'm not even talking about DiCaprio. I think, and I will invoke DiCaprio's name because he's an actor that I love. I've been on the record of loving his performance in For Killers of the Flower Moon. I don't know if anyone is talking about that as someone that might win that category. He'll likely be nominated for Best Actor, but I don't know if he's the front runner to win it.
No, I think he's very good in that film, though.
I think he is too. Like you could I said this on Chasing the Gold this last week with Brian and Shadon. Yeah. If DiCaprio missed and Jeffrey Wright got in, I'm not going to lose sleep.
I wouldn't lose sleep over that.
I wouldn't lose sleep over it.
Well, and the thing is, like, American Fiction, we'll talk about this more when we review the film. That is such a Jeffrey Wright vehicle. I mean, he has to carry so much of that, whereas Killers of the Flower Moon is such an ensemble, not just from an acting standpoint, but also having a monstrous director behind the camera, just commanding everyone. Because you have Robert De Niro doing some banging work there. You've got Lily Gladstone doing amazing work. That there's so much synergy between all of them that you almost could argue Jeffrey Wright has the harder job to carry a full movie on his own, really.
I agree. I wholly agree. And the other actor that I think is doing something similarly, but in a much heftier way emotionally, and this was maybe my favorite surprise, if you want to call it a surprise, of the morning, is Andrew Scott for All of Us Strangers. Another film we haven't talked about yet.
Not yet.
We'll get to it soon. But he's having to carry so much of that film, not all of it, but certainly a hefty amount. And it is emotionally overwhelming in a way that I love about that film.
Yeah.
And again, that's one that I would take over some of these conventional horses that are supposedly leading this race.
No,
aside
I
from
hear
Cillian, look, I am all on board with Cillian Murphy.
Me too.
Maybe taking this away. If that's the leading horse that ends up crossing the finish line first, no complaints from me. Cillian Murphy, absolutely deserved. I'm going to be there to champion. But if the Academy gave me a vote and I'm looking at Best Actor, to me it's Killian, it's Jeffrey Wright, it's Andrew Scott, and I want him to win so bad as well, Paul Giamatti.
I was just gonna say you better mention Paul Giamatti's name.
Paul Giamatti, and that's the other name I championed quite heavily on Chasing the Gold this last week as well. If it's not going to be, because in a realistic setting, Andrew Scott and Jeffrey Wright, they're not going to win. I'm simply championing them and hoping they get nominated for Best Actor.
I feel like nowadays the nomination is really all you need, right? I mean, that's all that excites me. I don't necessarily cheer on the winner as much anymore. I'm more interested in what actually gets nominated and represented. Because that's where the talking points now start.
I agree. And Jeffrey Wright and Andrew Scott this year would be my Paul Mescal. Like, I just want them to get in. Paul Giamatti, I think, has a legit shot to win. I
think he does. I mean, at least given the narrative that he hasn't won yet.
He hasn't won yet. It's arguably the best male performance of the year. Yeah. I think that if it's not Murphy, then it should be Giamatti.
Yeah. Because Giamatti's only ever been nominated one time, right? And it was for Cinderella Man.
Yeah, it wasn't even the film you would have thought of, and that's his, of course, previous outing in an Alexander Payne film.
Right.
So this is the time for, if we're strictly looking at the narrative of it all, it's an opportunity for the Academy to rectify that.
Course
correction, great performance.
Yep,
course correction. They could absolutely pull that string and give him the Oscar as a result. I could absolutely see that happening. Or it could be Cillian Murphy for Oppenheimer. Either way, I would be happy either way if it's those two.
Same.
But I'm just saying, I think there are other performances out there that are maybe a little overhyped, in my opinion. Just my opinion, but in my opinion.
Yeah. Which is why I love seeing some of the quieter performances get recognized here, at least among the actress categories, especially leading actress. We already talked about Alma Poisty. I don't know if I'm pronouncing her name right, but that performance in Fallen Leaves, love it. I love Sandra Hüller in Anatomy of a Fall. And these are, by comparison, they're not very loud or big performances. They're very internalized, and we love to see that. And the fact that the Globes are honoring that and not something that's too boisterous, I respect them for doing that. I really do.
I agree. And I know that there was some talk about Sandra Hüller maybe getting nominated twice because she also gives a striking performance in The Zone of Interest. I'm glad they opted to not do that because, or did she get nominated for?
I don't think she did.
She didn't get nominated, right, for supporting.
She got let's double check this. I know she got nominated for.
I guess I should, because I've already screwed up once earlier with Anatomy of a Fall.
She has can confirm she is nominated for Best Leading Actress Drama for Anatomy of a Fall. But then if we look at supporting, they always put this so out of order.
I know.
So give me a second here. Maybe you'll find it before. Okay. All right, thanks for confirming that.
Because that's another category I want to talk about. My whole point in that is to say it leaves another space open for another actress to get in there.
Sure.
And Best Supporting Actress, aside from score, might be my overall favorite from top to bottom. I guess I'll save that here for a second since we're on Best Actress. But that drama... you got Hüller, Mulligan, Gladstone, Benning, Greta Lee making it in. Oh my gosh, love that. And Kaylee Spaney, who isn't being talked about all that much, but
I like seeing that one.
Yeah, to your point, it's fascinating that she gets in because it is an awardsy kind of role in many ways. The Academy especially loves those kind of performances, but it's very quiet. It's a very tender, introspective performance. So while it has the facade of being something that is Academy friendly, the performance itself is actually not. So I don't know if she'll get in for the Oscars, but I at least love that she makes it in here.
Yeah.
Because it is deserving to be recognized, I think.
I will say, among those nominees you just listed there for Best Leading Actress in a Drama, Annette Bening for Naiad is probably the most globy of them all. Like the most,
Yeah.
okay, like that's great actress, icon, is in a movie, let's nominate her. Is more or less what that feels like there.
Yeah, I agree. I don't love Benning and Nayad. I think she's fine. She's serviceable.
I mean, Jodie
Certainly-
Foster's the better one, and she's also nominated too.
And she's also nominated. Yeah, I'll get
Yeah.
to that here in a second.
Yeah.
Because again, I love that category. But yeah, I mean, aside from Benning, and look, Benning's fine. I'm not taking away anything from her in that film.
It does at times, and we talked about it during our brief catch-up episode, that it feels like a movie built around an actress not having an Oscar win just yet.
Yeah.
Like it feels like they were trying to
a little-
use this film to
yeah.
campaign her once again.
Yeah, that film and maybe the performance as well, but especially the film seems to suggest that for sure.
Yeah.
But the other 5 around her are truly excellent. Great nominees
I agree.
there. And
I
I
agree.
love the comedy and musical category as well. This is where you do get to The Color Purple with Barrino getting in there, and she's very, very good in that film. I love the Jennifer Lawrence nomination as well.
Yeah.
Did you see her response to it? Her
I did
social
not.
media?
No, I did not. I got to find that.
It was really funny. I'm paraphrasing here, but it essentially had something. She said something along the lines of, "I'm excited, and it's a good excuse to open some lukewarm Chardonnay," which I thought was great. Love Jennifer. She's the best.
She is not a bullshitter. I love that.
No, but again, this is another really strong category. Jennifer Lawrence understands that she is not going to win this. I do love the nomination though, but Barrino, Natalie Portman, we mentioned Alma Poisty earlier, Margot Robbie, and Emma Stone. Are you kidding me?
It's a good crop. It's a really good crop.
That's good.
Yeah.
That's real good. And I think this is a little bit of a combination of what we've said the last few weeks, in the sense that, including this week's show, we started this whole conversation with, okay, the voting body here, it's different. It's indicative in the nominations. This is not the crop of nominees we would have gotten 3 years ago. Also, as we've talked about, 2023 just might be a really great year for film.
Oh, we've been talking about that. This is a banger of a year, man. It really is.
So good. And I think that's also evident in these nominees as well, right? I mean,
yeah, that's a good point. That's a really
say
good point.
what you will about The Color Purple. We'll get to it here shortly as well. But the performances are really great. Very, very good. So like Barrino, I do love. Last week we talked about how Portman gives one of her best. She's likely or could be on her way to an Oscar nomination.
Yeah.
I don't know if Margot Robbie gets in, but Emma Stone is for sure in.
This is where it'll get interesting, because I want to see if the Oscars and the Academy specifically, if they play the Barbenheimer game at all, because if they do, then I when it comes to the Oscars, I wouldn't be surprised if Margot Robbie gets in, or if Ryan Gosling gets in. In that case, I wouldn't, if they actually try and play the Barbenheimer game of it all. But if they do, I think Margot Robbie's definitely a shoo-in. Maybe not even a shoo-in. It's such a stacked category. There's too much competition there.
Who do you think of these 10? So combining drama and comedy here, of these 10, do you think it's 5 of these 10 for sure? There's no outsider getting in,
right?
Who do you think ends up as the 5? I guess is my question.
If they stick to Lily Gladstone as lead and not supporting, which is what they're campaigning her for, I think it's going to be Lily Gladstone. I think it's going to be Fantasia Barrino. Emma Stone.
Mm-hmm.
I think Emma Stone and Lily Gladstone are the 2 locks for me right now. Just looking at this very quickly, I think Greta Lee's getting in. I have a hunch that Past Lives is going to be a player at the Oscars. I have no basis for that. I'm probably going to eat those words in a couple months, or a couple weeks rather, when those nominations come out. But I just have a hunch. I have a hunch.
Okay, so for me, this comes down to, does Barrino get in? I think that is the biggest question of this category, because I think Gladstone is in.
Yeah.
I think Emma Stone for sure is in. Those 2.
Yeah.
Carey Mulligan, I think, is a lock. I really
You
do.
think she's a lock?
I think
Okay.
she's a lock. So I think it's those three.
You know, admittedly, since I haven't seen Maestro just yet, I haven't really observed the conversation around that movie because I want to go into that as blind as possible. So I'm a little bit behind the times on that one.
Sure.
But yeah, you've seen the movie and you know the
I have.
dialogue around it. So yeah, if she
Yeah.
does seem like a lock,
I
I'll
think
take
she's
your
a
word
lock.
for it.
And
Okay.
look, she is very good in the film. In some ways, in the third act, it becomes her movie.
Okay.
And I think she outacts her co-star.
Okay.
So I think she's a lock. And Sandra Huller for Anatomy of a Fall, I think, is also in. So then it becomes, is it Barrino? Is it Greta Lee? Is it Natalie Portman? Does Margot Robbie get in? That's where it gets really interesting, is that fifth slot, assuming that I'm correct on the 4. My gut tells me that it is Barrino, that she's going to get that fifth
I
spot.
think so. I think so.
That's my
it's
gut.
A hunch. It's a hunch.
But if it ends up being Greta Lee instead, I'll be celebrating for days.
Yeah. Okay.
And again, nothing against Barrino. She's great and also deserving. But man, Greta Lee in Past Lives is also spectacular.
That might be one of those movies, Past Lives specifically, that the Academy decides to recognize more for Celine's song and less so on the performances because it is such a first-time feature, right? And that's kind of the narrative around the film and how successful it is with that in mind. So maybe that's where it becomes more recognized in that regard. But I don't know. Greta Lee's so good in that movie.
She's so good.
So good.
Yeah. So that'll be interesting to keep an eye on for sure. Can we switch gears to supporting actress?
Sure.
Because I do really love this. I know there's been maybe some polarization around Emily Blunt for Oppenheimer because Christopher Nolan isn't, we'll say, the best writer for female characters in his movies.
Well,
but I do think, and there's certainly some truth to that, but I think Emily Blunt is really fantastic in this film.
Yeah. At the very least, he being Nolan provides us with the best moment for a female character in any one of his movies, and that's that interrogation scene between Emily Blunt and Jason Clarke.
And I think it's a little bit more beyond that as well. There's a couple of confrontations that she has with Oppenheimer earlier that I think is also like there's one moment where she confronts him in New Mexico pretty
that's great
on.
Even just the ending, which I don't want to give away, but there's a mere gesture that she chooses not to do. More specifically, choosing not to shake someone's hand says so much about that performance.
Oh my gosh. Yes. Yeah. Oh yeah. I agree. So I think it's more than just the interrogation scene. That will be the Oscar clip. It's the one people are talking about.
Yeah.
But I think it's far beyond just that one scene. So I think that's a well-deserved nomination. Danielle Brooks is everything in The Color Purple. She's really good. Really great. I mean, she just owns that role, completely and utterly magnetic. Loved her in that performance. We mentioned Jodie Foster earlier. She steals Naiad. She's very, very good. A very Globesy kind of performance as well, but I love it. Even if she gets the Oscar nomination, I don't know if I'll be too disheartened. It might depend on who misses. She's very good there. Julianne Moore in May December is great. Rosamund Pike is my favorite thing about Saltburn. And then Divine Joy Randolph for the holdovers. Oh my God.
Love it.
My heart just full.
So I've seen the holdovers twice. The second time was at home with my wife because I wanted to show her something that I really enjoyed and she was really intrigued by it. The second that Divine Joy Randolph's character is introduced, she doesn't even say anything. She just looks at the camera. My wife instantly says, I like her. I want to see more of her. I was like, well, get ready. She's a big part of this movie.
Yep. Oh, so good.
It's like she didn't have to do a darn thing. And it's like, you just love this character. You just love this character.
And I think based off of the conversation I've seen, I think what also makes this category so compelling is that when it comes down to who wins, whether you're talking about the Globe or even the Oscar, I think this comes down to Randolph and Brooks. I really do.
I think so.
And that is very exciting to me.
That's
either
fun.
one of those could win, and I'm going to be absolutely ravishing. Like I love both of those performances.
Yeah.
But
movies are good. Movies are good, man.
Movies are good. And then I think the question mark here, and this is a little bit different than what we were talking about with Best Actress. I do think there's an outside player that isn't nominated here with the Globes, but could be an impact at the Oscars, and that's Taraji P. Henson for The Color Purple. Could they double nominate that film similarly to what they did last year with Everything Everywhere All at Once?
Oh yeah, they might.
It clearly didn't hurt that film. So
no, usually it hurts those films.
Usually it does.
Yeah.
Last year it did not. So Brooks and Henson getting in, I think could very well happen. And I really don't think it hurts. It's Brooks's chance.
Correct me if I'm wrong. It's been a while since Taraji P. Henson's been nominated, because hasn't she only been nominated for The Curious Case of Benjamin Button?
Has it really been just that one? I'm not sure. I'd have to look.
All right, I am looking this up.
Well,
now
while you look that up, that is an outside performance that I do think could be at play here.
Nominated for 1 Oscar for The Curious Case of Benjamin Button back in 2008.
Well, there you go. I do think that Blunt is in. I'm fairly confident that's a lock there. And then it comes down to, like, is Jodie Foster going to be a lock for this category at the Oscars? I don't know if I can go that far.
I don't know.
But it is interesting. And then the one other actress for this category that we haven't talked about yet, and I don't know how much of a player it is, but the one I'm really curious about is Juliette Binoche for The Taste of Things. She is excellent with a capital E in that film.
I thought you were about to say she's tasty in that one.
She is delicious in that movie.
The way your hand gesture just moved, it was like, was that a chef's kiss right there?
It was. It was very deliberately a chef's kiss.
Oh, yeah.
She is
clever.
Incredible in that film. But the thing is, it's a little bit of, okay, well, when we're talking about foreign performances, it's not often you get multiple in these categories. And but sometimes you do see one sneaking in there, and she could very well be the one for this category.
For sure.
So, and I think that would be kind of interesting to see Sandra Huller get in for Picture, and then Juliette Binoche for The Taste of Things. Maybe Fallen Leaves as well. It's interesting how foreign films could end up being more of a player this year than typically when it comes to some of these above the line categories anyway.
Hey, Parasite, Bertha Parasite.
Yeah, there you go. I mean, and we mentioned Greta Lee earlier. That's another one that could be a part of this. I mean, what if
Celine Song as well? And just foreign language films in general, whether it be performances on screen or the respective filmmakers behind the camera and writing those films. I could see a lot of love for a lot of some of these films I haven't even seen yet, but Anatomy of a Fall is being regarded as one of the best films of the year. The Zone of Interest is one of the best reviewed films of the year. There's so much there
and that's the thing, right? So, because I was going to bring up Sandra Huller as well, even though she's, we mentioned she's not nominated for supporting at the Globes. Maybe that is a contender at the Oscars for supporting.
Maybe.
I don't know. Do they want to double nominate her? That's another question. I would assume they don't, because they want to leave that open for someone else. And maybe that's a Juliette Binoche. But I think Blunt, Randolph, and Brooks are for sure in at the Oscars. For sure.
I think you're right.
Jodie Foster probably, and then again, it's who gets that fifth. Is it Henson? Is it Julianne Moore? Someone that I kind of want to get in is Penelope Cruz. We haven't talked Ferrari yet, but oh my God!
I mean, I'm still going to be pulling. I'm still going to pull for Rachel McAdams in Are You There, God? It's me, Margaret.
And that's another one too.
Yeah.
If it's not Cruz, if it's not Henson, or even Julianne Moore, who I love, McAdams sneaking into that fifth, I would be happy with that too.
I wouldn't be surprised either. Yeah, I don't know if I would predict it, but I wouldn't be surprised if it happens at least.
And then my long shot, I guess contender, not really contender, but the long shot to get into the five is Rosamund Pike for Saltburn. I think she's kind of lower on the list when it comes to the Oscars. But
Yeah.
I would love if she got into it. She's so good at that movie.
Yeah, I liked her. Yeah, she's not going to be in my 5. I'll tell you that when it comes to the In Session Film Awards, but I do like her in that film.
Yeah, I think she's by far the best thing about that movie as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, it's certainly up there.
Do you have any thoughts on screenplay or any of these other categories? Song?
I got to pull up screenplay to check on something there. Well, I will say with Best Original Song, we sometimes talk about how award ceremonies don't like to double dip all that often by putting the same movie in the same category more than once.
Mm-hmm.
And in Best Original Song, like half the nominees are all from Barbie.
Yeah, they have 3 Barbie songs.
Yeah, so I mean, if you're a betting man, I think you want to bet on Barbie for that one.
And look, I love all 3 of those songs.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if the Oscars needs to regurgitate the formula in nominating 3 of them.
No.
I do think I'm Just Ken is going to be in. And
Yeah.
maybe What I Was Made For. I could see Billie Eilish getting in as well.
Yeah, I think those 2 are the most likely. It would be really funny if come Globe time, the winner ends up going to Peaches for the Super Mario Brothers movie.
I was just going to say, I love that made it. I don't know how Oscar-y that is, but it is very Globes of them to do. Yeah, get Jack Black there, put him on piano. You have to let him sing that song.
He's going to. He has to. That's the only reason why you nominated him.
Yeah,
it's just to get that performance because they don't want to fall into another "we don't talk about Bruno" situation where they want to see the song get performed because it's a big hit, but they failed to nominate it.
Yeah,
so this is their way of at least making sense out of it.
I agree. What a nominee that was. Absolutely love that.
Yeah.
When it comes to screenplay, I mentioned earlier, my only thought around this category is The Holdovers not getting in, which I do think is surprising.
Yeah.
But we have Baumbach and Gerwig, of course, Tony McNamara, Christopher Nolan, Eric Roth and Scorsese, Celine Song there once again.
Yeah.
And then, of course, Justine Triet and Arthur Harari for Anatomy of a Fall.
Yeah.
Pretty great list. Despite Holdovers missing, I don't know if I can complain too much.
No, well, especially having a foreign language film get recognized like that, not just in that category, but honestly in general. Like we keep going back to Anatomy of a Fall being very heavily recognized here. Like that doesn't happen all that often, at least with the
films
Globes.
there, right? I mean, that's exciting. That's very exciting.
Yeah. Well, like with Past Lives, would we consider that a foreign language film? I know that there was some debate going on Twitter as to whether it really should qualify as a quote unquote foreign language film. I mean, but there is a good chunk of it that is spoken not in English. And part of that movie's charm and part of the point is the cultural disparity between America and where they're from, right? So I can kind of see the thematic point as to why you qualified as a foreign language film as well.
Yeah. Goes a little bit back and forth.
Yeah.
I mean, it's at least 50-50. I don't think it's less than that, is it?
I don't know. I'd have to see it again. Yeah.
Yeah. In my mind, it's like at least 50-50, but maybe I'm just wrong. I'm a big math guy. And by that, I mean, I'm not good at math, but I believe in math because it's objective and it doesn't.
You like numbers. You like statistics.
Yes.
But if someone told you to do a statistical analysis on something, like, okay, where? Yeah. No. Okay. What's 2 + 2 again?
Yeah. Don't ask me to do it. But if you tell me math, I will believe you. Just give me the analysis. But yeah, it's certainly been a while, but that's my memory of it. Either way, it doesn't matter. Both great films.
Yeah.
Killers absolutely belongs there. Oppenheimer, of course. Poor Things. If I had to switch out The Holdovers for something, it might be Barbie, but I'm not going to be upset about Gerwig and Baumbach being there.
No. I mean, yeah, if we're getting personal, if there's one that I would probably replace with The Holdovers, I would probably take out Poor Things of the batch here.
Yeah.
Primarily
you were
because
lesser on it than me, but
it's not even just that. I feel like the things that make that movie really interesting are more so in how Yorgos visualizes that movie. and the way he brings to life the story beats from the page, that I think there's
That's
more.
fair.
I think there's more going on the page with a movie like The Holdovers, for instance, because it unfolds
yeah.
like a novel, right? And
Mhm.
that's really the way I'm looking at it, as opposed to just how I feel about the film in general.
Okay, fair enough. I think that's an argument I can certainly buy into.
You're welcome.
But on the whole, I do really like that screenplay category. Again,
Yeah.
maybe it's just how great the year is overall and everything else we've talked about, but
Mhm.
it just feels like a more concrete crop of nominees than what we're used to.
For sure. For sure.
So yeah, do love that. The other category I want to talk about briefly, actually, there's two. We do need to talk about director, but we can end there before we get to musicals. I briefly want to touch on animated because I think it's been a really great year for animated movies. It's a little bit ironic. We haven't quite got to the break yet because there is a movie we're going to talk about there during the break that is missing here.
I knew you were going to go there. I deliberately saved myself from talking about it because I knew we were going to end with this.
Yeah, like Turtles missing, and it's not just because they're sponsoring this week's episode. Okay, this is not part of the break. Okay, it's not part of the ad.
Yeah.
I genuinely really like the film, and I think it's worthy of being a nomination. It's better than Super Mario Brothers. It's better than Wish. I liked Suzumi, but I would probably take Turtles over Suzumi. Like, there's a boldness to Turtles that I really appreciate.
Yeah.
So to me, it comes down to Elemental, it's Spider-Man, it's The Boy and the Heron, it's Turtles, and then the other film for me, which is also not here, is the Netflix film Nimona, I believe it's called.
Oh yeah, I heard a lot of good things about that one. Haven't seen it yet.
If I had an Oscars vote, those would be my 5.
There's also a small animated film another one I haven't seen called Robot Dreams.
Yeah, I haven't seen that one yet.
Yeah, that's one I hope to catch up with. It's another Neon film, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
But looking at this batch, I think many people would agree, at least those in our circle, that Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse and The Boy and the Heron are the two. Those are the two locks, right? And if I were to pick a third place one, it would probably be Turtles. Even though it's not nominated here, if I had to include it within this now 7, I would say Turtles is my third favorite of the batch if it is part of that 7. I think it is that good. I think it's a very good movie.
And I think it's going to be more of an Oscars player than the Globes. Yeah. I don't know if it's a cultural thing or not, if Turtles doesn't translate to a foreign voting body as much. I think it gets in at the Oscars, though. I really do.
Yeah, I think it will.
Because I don't think Suzumi gets in. Wish is Disney, so it's hard for me to deny it. I've said this for years. Everyone has said this for years. I can't, like Disney and Pixar essentially pay for that category.
Well,
and the last time they lost was the last Spider-Man movie.
Yeah. Well, maybe they'll get their money's worth by at least just having Elemental there.
Well, and that's the thing. Elemental, I think, is deserving. I'm with you that Turtles is probably my number 3, but I'm really high on Elemental. So if it's not Turtles, then Elemental is a concrete number 3 for me. Those 4, as far as I'm concerned, should absolutely be locks at the Oscars.
Yeah, I wouldn't be opposed to that. That 5th slot could be a surprising one, though. I could see that 5th one being the Super Mario Brothers movie just because it was such a box office hit.
It was huge.
Yeah. I don't think any awards body will ignore that. So I could see that getting in. But, sometimes animated film is where you get a wonky nominee. Maybe that's where Robot Dreams comes into play. So maybe it gets a little weird.
I think the quote-unquote oddball nominee at the Oscars is going to be Miyazaki. Because they do tend to nominate his films, at least some, like Ghibli is always in the conversation. Not to win, but to be nominated anyway.
Yeah.
But I do think that Turtles or maybe Elemental, if they do have any sort of outside chance of not getting in, it's because they're probably going to go with Mario Brothers for the reasons you're talking about. And Disney's Wish. Until I see it not get nominated, it's hard for me to believe because Disney they own that category.
Yeah.
and Pixar comes along with that. So I have to believe Elemental and Wish is in, Heron is in, Spider-Man is in. So that leaves one slot. And I don't know, like, could Turtles miss because Mario Brothers gets that 5th slot? So I don't know. I feel like now I'm arguing against my initial argument because I really thought Turtles was going to be a lock for the Oscars, but now that I'm thinking about it out loud here,
it's hard. I mean, I think a lot of it comes down to whether Disney gets represented twice between both Pixar and Walt Disney Animation Studios. That's Elemental and
Turtles
Wish.
should be in though. It should.
I agree. I agree. If Wish gets in, I feel like it's only because it still carries the Disney name. But it's been having such a lukewarm response. It might get forgotten when it comes to award season.
Here's the other thing with animated that's really interesting. Forever we thought Spider-Man was a lock to win this category.
Oh yeah.
But now with Miyazaki, I don't know if that's the case anymore.
I think it's a 2-horse race right now between Spider-Man and Heron. Like Miyazaki and Spider-Man are fighting for this one, I think.
Yeah. And that's wild because 6 months ago we couldn't have fathomed. We knew that it was coming out, but I don't know if we could have.
6 months ago, people were saying that Across the Spider-Verse might win Best Picture. Like that's what they were saying.
People were really high on it. Really, really high on that film. And look, if the voting Academy is that high on it, that it gets a Best Picture nominee, then we know it's going to win animated. And I would be excited if that's the 10th nominee there for Best Picture. I don't think that's going to happen though. And I find it fascinating because both of those films are great. Either of them could win, and we as audiences that get to experience those movies, we also win. No matter who wins that category, it's going to be great. But I do love that we now have 2 horses in the race. It's not just a lock for Spider-Man.
Yeah,
and that's fun.
I'm with you. All right, should we talk about Best Director to close this out?
Yep. Yeah, we can talk about a director here. So,
yeah,
thoughts on director?
Let's see. Who do we have? We have Bradley Cooper, Greta Gerwig, Yorgos Lanthimos, Christopher Nolan, Martin Scorsese, Celine Song. Once again, that was the one that kind of took me most by surprise. Right, is seeing Celine Song because she was also nominated for screenplay as well. Right.
Yep.
So, and with Greta Lee getting nominated for Best Actress, at least for that movie in that respective category, Past Lives is going to be a player. It's a player.
It's going to be a player. You got to think that it's one of the big ones to maybe even steal Best Picture drama. It's got to get beyond Scorsese and Nolan. So I don't know if that's going to happen, but that would be really fun. It's certainly in the mix. That's for sure.
I will say, I mean, there have been many films this year that have been so well directed that should be in this conversation, right? Like even Todd Haynes should be in this conversation.
Yeah.
But let's say if you take out Celine's Song, which I wouldn't recommend you do, and you're left with those 5, I wouldn't be surprised if those are your 5 at the Oscars. I based on the conversations that I've been hearing, I wouldn't be surprised. But at the same time, there are still many other directors that I haven't even mentioned yet that I could still see fall into that category. Like I wouldn't be surprised if Jonathan Glazer gets in for The Zone of Interest. Like
that's another name that I'm a little surprised that missed that Celine Song got in before Glazer. But I mean, I love that Celine Song is here. Don't get me wrong. That's one of the best surprises of the morning for sure. But yeah, I mean, I could. There was definitely a world where Glazer gets in here, or even an Alexander Payne, Todd Haynes you mentioned earlier. There's certainly a few names here that could have easily have been here. I love this 6 though. Love this 6.
Yeah, it's a good 6.
You know, I was being vague earlier. I'm just gonna let the cat out of the bag. I apologize in advance if this comes off contrarian. I apologize if it feels like I'm anti this actor. I'm not. But I am of the opinion that Bradley Cooper, the director, is better than Bradley Cooper, the actor.
Gotcha. Okay.
If I had a voting, if I got a chance to vote, Bradley Cooper, the actor, would not be in my 5.
Yeah, and that's who I thought you were talking about.
But he wouldn't be in my 5.
And the thing is, like, we know he's a great actor. When he directed himself in A Star Is Born, he was amazing in that movie. Yeah. Right? Yeah. He's capable.
And look, again, I want to be clear. I'm not saying he's bad in the movie. I don't think he's bad. That cathedral scene that everyone is harping on about on social media, he truly is great in that moment. Really embodies the character and goes for it. It's a phenomenal moment in that film. But on the whole, I don't think Bradley Cooper, the actor, can match Bradley Cooper, the director. It is his vision, his passion for that film comes through in his filmmaking. And I think a best director nom, I'm all in.
Gotcha.
Yes.
Okay.
Absolutely. Bradley Cooper, the director, as a nominee, I would not have any gripes with. I do think, though, as an actor, as I mentioned earlier, I would take Andrew Scott over him. I would take Jeffrey Wright over him.
Okay.
Giamatti, of course. Joaquin Phoenix for Napoleon. Just kidding on that one, but maybe not.
I mean, I still love him in that movie.
It's so funny to me. But, okay, being facetious aside, there are certainly a few others. Heck, I might even take Coleman Domingo over Cooper. Domingo and Rustin is, that film might not be as good as Maestro.
Film's not great, but he's good in it.
He's great in that. So if I had to choose, I would say, hey, let's recognize Bradley Cooper, the director, because he really does come to play. Yeah. And I think he's very good there. So, assuming Celine's song doesn't make it into the Oscars, you remove him, I think the other 5 are probably the 5 that we get. And honestly, I'm not going to lose sleep over that.
No, I think it's a good crop, but at the same time, I feel like when we see movies like The Boy and the Heron and Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse, is there ever a time that we can start recognizing the direction work that goes into animation? And I'm not saying that they should be in the conversation here, but animation is such a different animal that maybe it should be its own category. But at the same time, should it also be up against these other directing jobs? Because of the craft and the effort that it takes to make those movies. Should we not be overlooking that? Those are well-directed movies, The Boy and the Heron and Across the Spider-Verse. They play with form in a very unique way that you just can't do with live action. So it's an interesting thing. It's an interesting thing.
I agree. I wholeheartedly agree. I made the same argument with something like Inside Out because that film was so inventive with its animation and storytelling, taking concepts that were and still are extremely sophisticated and complex. I mean, if you were to simply sit here and listen to a psychologist try to break this down, your mind would simply melt away.
There's a maturity there.
There's
an honesty.
You wouldn't be able to handle it. But that film takes those concepts and makes them so visually appetizing and accessible. You understand everything. And so to your point, yes, there are animated movies where the direction should absolutely be talked about for best director because of how it's able to convey its world building. And that's the thing with animation is you're able to do things that you just can't do in live action.
But there's also the argument that a lot of animated films are by nature more collaborative efforts than the auteur theory, unless you're a Hayao Miyazaki, right? That's kind of the difference there. I feel like because of so much of that being his sole vision, it's a little bit of a different animal. But Across the Spider-Verse has 3 people credited as director, right?
Yeah.
And it's hard to separate who's who in that regard. Not to say that category needs to, but it does add a level of confusion if you're trying to add animation into the fold then. So I get why they don't, but I would also love to see it happen
But you can't deny it. Either way, you can't deny it.
You can't deny that as far as how well directed Across the Spider-Verse is. That movie plays with form in such a unique way that,
and that's the thing.
Its direction and filmmaking needs to be honored, right?
I agree.
That's the thing.
mean, in all of these examples we've brought up, it's not just the animation itself, which is great, but yes, it's how distinctive and innovative they are. It's maybe the color palette, it's the score, it's the sound design. You know, all of that is at play. That's what being in this case, it's not just a director talking to animators and that's it. Like there's so much more that goes into making those movies and why they're so special.
Yeah.
And so I agree. I agree, but I do think this is a very good best director lineup, and I think that those first 5 names we listed out there get in. I think it's the 5 minus Celine. Although if Celine gets in, if she steals one of those,
that'll be interesting.
Pop the champagne.
That'd be well. It'll be even funnier if that 5th nominee goes to Chad Stileski for John Wick Chapter 4 at the Oscars.
Could you imagine? Oh my God.
At this point now, I don't think I'd be surprised.
I wouldn't either. All right, Brendan, we got something very exciting that we need to talk about.
Cowabunga, dude.
Cowabunga. It's a shell-shocking of a good time.
It really is, yeah.
Of course, we're talking about Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Mutant Mayhem. I know we briefly just talked about it in the last segment. It unfortunately did not get nominated for a Golden Globe. However, I am confident.
Snub.
I'm confident it's going to get nominated for an Oscar. As
hope
I
so.
noted.
Hope so. Very good
Certainly
movie.
Hope so as well. Either way, the good news is we have 5 Blu-rays to give out.
Oh, we do.
And
yeah.
what's very exciting, hopefully what's very exciting about this Blu-ray giveaway is that we have a quote on the front cover of the Blu-ray. I cannot confirm that 100% though, because I don't have one on hand. However,
we might.
All of the artwork that I've seen suggests that the quote on the front is from writer, good friend of the show, M.N. Miller, who wrote the review for us at InSessionFilm.com. His quote is on the front cover of the 4K and the Blu-ray. As far as I know, that is what we're getting.
Yeah.
I will confirm this later on this week, but I'm pretty sure that's what we're getting.
It's a great quote. It perfectly describes the movie. It's so good it might get patented for this movie because it's so specific for it. A shell-shocking time.
Exactly. He did a great job.
It's a great review. Yeah.
Love the review. And it's very exciting that Paramount has taken it and is using it for all of their marketing.
Yeah.
It's been fun to see it on TV and the commercials and on social media and all that fun stuff.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Love seeing it on those ads.
Absolutely. And, and it's also funny because we're recording this the day before it's going out into the public.
Yes.
So by the time this comes to you, we'll already know. We'll probably have a physical copy in our hands. Maybe I could digitally if I had the skill sets to do that, maybe I would. But
yeah.
I don't. Sadly, I don't. I also don't know if I have the time to do that.
No, that takes a lot of magic.
We're going to assume, again, because all the artwork I've seen has MN's quote on it. So that's very exciting. It's coming out this week. Nostalgic. Get your Blu-ray or 4K. And as I noted, we have 5 Blu-rays to give away ourselves.
Yeah.
And if you want to win a copy of this, simply follow us on social media.
Yeah.
Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. We'll put out a post and we'll have instructions there in how you can win one of these Blu-ray copies of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Mutant Mayhem. It's going to be a lot of fun. So
absolutely. Good movie.
Follow us and get your shell-shocking good time going on this week. So follow us. Be on the lookout for a free Blu-ray copy of Mutant Mayhem. It's the holiday season, Brendan. You know what that means.
Oh, I love coffee. It tastes good at this time of year, doesn't it?
It's the best drink of the season. We all know this. That's why we love Coffee Cult. They source the best coffee on the planet. Specialty grade Arabica coffee from 20 countries around the globe.
Yeah.
And they inspect each one of the green coffee beans that come in. They don't just take any bag of specialty grade, because some of these have amazing, immaculate Arabica coffee beans. Some of them have defects.
Yeah.
And a lot of coffee companies, they don't care. They just take the bag as it is. They throw it in the roaster and they ship that out into the bag. And look, that might be
quantity over quality.
exactly. And that could still be an okay coffee, but it won't be the best.
No.
And that's what separates Coffee Cult, because they take out those defects. If it's not a perfect green coffee bean, they don't roast it, they don't use it, they only take the good stuff, which is why it might be a little pricier than something like, XYZ coffee company you find it in your stores that tastes like garbage. This isn't garbage coffee. This is
not tin can
amazing.
coffee.
No, exactly. Exactly. It's really good. And with the holiday season, they have a holiday blend that I love. It is so good.
Cannot wait.
It tastes like Christmas in a cup. It's fantastic. It's available right now that you can go and check out. They have a bourbon coffee. They just got in Jamaican Blue Mountain, for those familiar with the Jamaican coffee, which is exquisite, one of the best coffees on the planet. All of that is available at coffeecult.com. That's coffee with a K, cult with a K. And if you use our code, which is what, Brendan?
ISF. Capital I, capital S, capital F. And I have to thank Coffee Cult for listening to me when I say that coffee and bourbon, my two drinks of choice for the holiday season, and they fused. They fused.
They fused together. Yeah, for a bourbon barrel dark roast. It's just so good. It's so good. Go to coffeecult.com, use our code, and you'll get 15% off your order. Again, that code is ISF, 15% off at coffeecult.com. All right, let's talk about movie musicals.
Yeah, let's transition. Let's go now for something completely different.
Yeah. We went a little long there on Golden Globes, so we probably won't be able to get into all of these films as much as we would like to. But we're going to aim to do what we did last week with the Nicolas Cage draft. We're going to have 10 rounds.
Yep.
Brendan and I going back and forth on this. And we'll do it snake style like we did last week.
Yeah. You just got to flip a coin and see who goes first, right?
Well, I was actually thinking in this case, since I went first last week, I'll just go ahead and give you the floor.
Oh, that's nice of you.
Second,
because you're going to be really mad that I go first now.
I mean, maybe, but there's so many great musicals to choose from.
There are. Now, I guess before we get into this, we should clarify, we're looking at musicals in the most traditional sense. Yes. So you talked about this in the beginning of this episode, plugging your 10th anniversary review of Inside Llewyn Davis.
Yes.
That's the kind of movie we would not qualify for this, because it's more of a music performance film as opposed to a musical.
Absolutely.
So with that, we just want to lay that groundwork there, that criteria out there, that we're focusing on musicals themselves in the most traditional sense.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So,
and also I want to, before we start, I also want to throw this caveat out there as well, because I did get some replies on social media for this.
Okay.
That I want to bring clarity to it. As Brendan and I are going through these, we are not necessarily picking films that are conducive to our own personal rankings, or like that we feel like wherever these films fall, that's, the be all end all of how we feel about them. There are certainly several factors that go into play here. Obviously, part of it is the selection process. Brendan, whatever he takes at number one, very well could be my favorite musical. I can't take it if he takes it, obviously. And also we're trying to draft a team that will pander to the public when we put this out there for voting purposes.
Yeah.
So some of this will be a consideration of what we think is best, what our favorites are, but also the films we think people will vote for. It's a combination of all of these things. Yep. I don't know if we made that as clear last week, so I wanted to bring that to this, since there was, I guess we got some replies that seem to have missed that. So.
And that's a good point to make, because it completely changes when we're asking people to vote on what they think was the better list, the better drafted team, right? Because if we weren't doing that and we were just picking our favorites, then that's a completely different criteria. That's a completely different task. Yeah.
Exactly. Like last week, I think I had The Rock as my third selection. National Treasure was like my sixth. If I was doing a personal ranking for Nick Cage's performances and characters, those films would not be that high. They wouldn't.
Right. Right.
You know, like I think I had Moonstruck at like 7th. That would be much higher on a personal ranking for me.
Oh yeah, yeah.
But you know, there's a bunch of factors at play when we're doing a draft. I think most people are aware of this, but I wanted to at least throw that out there for those that might be a little confused though as to what this is.
Yeah. Going back to the Nick Cage draft before we get into musicals, did we ever reveal the outcome of that?
I don't know if we did.
I don't think we did.
And honestly, I'd have to look it up. I don't even know.
I think it was pretty close. I think you won.
It was 50-50 the last I saw. But
I think it ended up being 55-45 in your favor when it was all said and done.
Okay. It was very close either way.
Yeah.
And I think that's indicative of the lineups really, because both of them are seem about even.
That's the thing. It's easier and more fun to do a draft like this when you have at least 4 or 5 people, because then it becomes even more competitive. Because we're going to get to 10 musicals here, and there's going to be at least like 15 or 20 that could still be part of the conversation, right?
Exactly. Unless one of us takes a really outside weird choice. I mean, we're going to be talking about 20 of the general consensus best musicals ever. It's hard to say, oh, this one is just so much more worse.
like one of us, like at number 1, we pick, I don't know, Repo the Genetic Opera or something like that.
Yeah. Unless that happens, I don't like it's probably always going to line up with it just being the two of us. But hey, we're here to have fun. So we're going to draft anyway.
Yep. And I'm going first. You're being nice about that, JD? All right. I'm sorry. I'm picking Singing in the Rain.
Oh, okay. All right. Yeah. Here we go.
But I feel like it's because when you think of movie musicals, this has kind of become synonymous with what movie musicals are all about. It's sort of like the blueprint definition of them. And the fact that it came out in 1952 and still looks as good and fresh as it does now, it's no secret that someone like Damien Chazelle was so inspired by this movie that you could see it all over his work even nowadays. The film directed by Stanley Donen and Gene Kelly. Like we're running long here on this episode, GD. We can't spend too much time talking about our rationales for these picks, but I feel like the picks speak for themselves, right? And for those who know Singing in the Rain, you know it's one of the best movie musicals of all time. You know it's probably the best movie musical of all time. So the reputation speaks for itself, honestly.
Absolutely. That would have been my first pick. And again, that is probably my favorite musical of all time. I can't go with it. It's not going to be on my list. So already my personal ranking is just off here.
Yeah, you did that to yourself, and I thank you for it.
You know, no problem. All right, my first pick here is going to be The Wizard of Oz.
That was high on my list. Oh, gosh, great movie.
So great for a lot of reasons. I don't need to get into it. You all know why the movie is great. I will simply say I did show this to my son, Sam, I believe earlier this year. It might have been last year. But to speak to its greatness, how it simply lingers from generation to generation. Because I showed him this. He loved it. Absolutely loved it.
So good. So good.
Had a great time and wasn't scared of the flying monkeys at all. Really in fact, he wanted to watch that scene, like all of that again. Or like when she melts away at the end, he wanted to rewatch that whole scene.
It's so inventive. That's why. Honestly, as a kid, the thing that scared me the most was the tornado. That was the thing that scared me the most.
Yeah, absolutely. So incredible movie. And yeah, I mean, when younger kids these days, when they have everything at their fingertips, and it still packs a punch, even with kids today. So Wizard of Oz. All right, so since we're snaking, it's back to me.
Back to you for number 2.
This is maybe a little bit of a cinephile pick here, but I'm going to go with The Umbrellas of Cherbourg for my next pick here.
That might be my favorite movie musical of all time.
I knew Brennan loved it. I don't know if you would have gone for it.
I would. Okay, admittedly, I wanted to have it just because I love this movie so much, but I don't think I would have picked it this early. There's a few others here that I might prioritize,
and that's very fair. I'm definitely taking a little bit of a risk here. This is more of I think this is one of the best films of all time kind of scenario.
Yep.
And I didn't want to leave it lingering because I wasn't sure if you would go for it. If not, your number 2, maybe your number 3, and I wanted to have it. So maybe reaching here at number 3 overall, my second pick here, but it's simply one of the best films of all time. So
Yeah, I agree.
that's why
I agree.
went with it.
And before I get to let me first say I adore this film. I remember when we reviewed it back on Extra Film. I think it was the same year La La Land came out because we knew it was such an influence on that film.
Yes.
And at that time it was a first time watch for me. I was like, okay, instant 5 stars. I've never been this blown away by a movie musical this immediately. It was one of the most beautiful things I've ever seen. So I agree with you on that. Now, before I get to my next picks, my number 2 and 3, there's something we should clarify. And I just and because I have these films listed here, but I don't know if we ever specified, are we including animation?
Mm-hmm.
We are?
Oh, yeah. I have several on my list I plan to pick.
All right. Well, my number 2 is The Lion King.
Okay, then. I guess thievery is just the theme of this episode, or at least this segment of the show.
You like the movie way more than I do, but I'm trying to. This is the whole point of a draft, right? Which film or films do I think are going to cater most to audiences? And I think in the case of trying to build my list, The Lion King is going to be that film for a lot of people. I think in many ways it is sort of the quintessential film from the Disney Renaissance era for those of us who grew up in that era.
Yeah,
it's not my favorite from that era.
I would have picked it in the next round, in one of my next couple of picks, I should say.
Yeah. I trust me, JD. I wasn't playing the thief game or the thievery game. I wasn't playing the thief game.
Sure. Yeah.
I was not being James Caan here. I was not trying to rob the safe. I genuinely think this is just one of those movies that so many people can relate.
It's an all-timer. Look, yeah. I truly think it's one of the best films of all time.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's a great pick. And I truly think it's one of the best animated films of all time and Disney's overall best.
So now this gets interesting of what I want to go with next. So snaking back around to me for my number 3 pick, you know what? I might get a little weird with this one. This might be one that no one would expect to go this early. I'm going to go the Rocky Horror Picture Show.
Oh, I did not anticipate that. When you said I'm going to get a little weird with it, I was fully anticipating something else.
Okay. I'm curious what that film is, but don't say it because we don't want to play those cards too early. But the reason why I'm picking the Rocky Horror Picture Show is that it's just developed such a cult status. Like, it's sort of like the definition of how cult films get made, right?
Yeah.
Like when you look up cult film in the dictionary, there are certain films that kind of help coin the term. And the Rocky Horror Picture Show, I think, is ultimately one of them. Sort of created a cult-like movement with regard to what films can do and how they evolve and develop their own internalized audiences. And it still holds true today. Like, there are different iterations of this movie, or this story, rather. The songs still stand out, especially around Halloween time. I think that this is always some type of staple around the Halloween season. So it's always top of mind. I think a lot of people still really like it and still know it. So Rocky Horror Picture Show, I'm going to pick here.
Okay. No, that's a very interesting pick. I love the audacity to go with that one.
It's a really cool movie.
Really cool movie. I agree. Good stuff there. All right. For my next pick, I'm going to take your Lion King and I'm going to raise you a Beauty and the Beast.
Oh, you're going to raise me a Hercules. Okay, I see what you're doing there.
I'm going with Beauty and the Beast for really a lot of the same reasons. It's one of Disney's best. For some, they'll argue that it is Disney's best. Mm-hmm. It is one of the few animated films to make it into Best Picture at the Oscars.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
What else can you say about it? It's fantastic. And I'm picking here because I think, like The Lion King, you know, it has a mass appeal that people will like and vote for, I think.
I think so, too. I think it's a great film. This is my favorite from the Disney Renaissance era. I can say that now because you picked it. I didn't want to say it earlier just to play those cards too early. But yeah, this is top 3 Disney animated for me.
Yeah. All right. So moving on to my next selection.
Number 4.
There's so many good movies here.
All right, now it's getting fun.
Okay. This is a little bit tricky because there are two versions of it.
I
I'm
knew when
going
you
with
said
West
tricky.
Side Story,
When you said tricky, I knew that's what you were referring to.
but I don't know which one to go with because they're both great.
I can't. I mean, I can't tell you to pick both because then that gives you an automatic edge. Like, because technically, you have two movies there that people really like.
Yeah. Man, this is tough. I do really love the Spielberg of it all, and he's been so top of mind lately, and it does feel like as if people have really come around on his West Side Story.
Yeah.
I think I'm going to go with the original. I'm going to go with the
Okay.
61 movie.
Okay.
Just because of its reputation, and I think it might have a broader voting base because of that.
That's
could
fair.
be way off on that because I do think people are really coming around on Spielberg's film, but
I think
I'm
so
going
too.
I'm going to go with the 61, and I just think it might have a little bit more of a broader voting base there. But both versions are very good. I do really like them both.
Okay.
That's where I'm going with for my next one.
All right, West Side Story, 1961, and those are okay. So those are your two. So now it's snaking back to me to do two more.
Yep.
Oof. Okay. Let's look at my list. Of course, I just put it all on my phone here. Mary Poppins.
Ah, man. Yeah, that's good. Yeah, that was going to be one of my next ones if somehow it made it back to me.
It's the Julie Andrews of it all. It really is. I think she gives one of the best performances in any movie musical. Like if you were to ask me just straight up, don't think about it, Brendan. Who gives the best performance in any movie musical? Julie Andrews might be the first one that comes to mind in this movie. Again, it's kind of a childhood favorite of mine. I think a lot of us grew up with it in a certain way. It's kind of like it was kind of like between that and The Wizard of Oz for me. I grew up with these movies and of course all the films from the Disney Renaissance era, but Mary Poppins was a huge staple in my household. I love this movie. And I think a lot of other people do as well. So Mary Poppins, I'll take that for my number 4. For my number 5, let's get weird. Dancer in the Dark.
See, that's the one I thought you were going to go with the last time.
Okay. And it's interesting.
I'm honestly shocked it went this slow.
And it's interesting because I just said with my Mary Poppins pick that if someone were to ask me the best performance in a movie musical, don't think about it. Who is it? I would say, Julie Andrews in Mary Poppins. Yet I have also vocally said that I think Bjork in Dancer in the Dark gives maybe the best female performance of all time in any movie. It's like she is that good here, but it's hard to praise her so much given what she went through on set regarding Lars von Trier and the abuse that she dealt with. But at the same time, the product that was made and the performance on screen is one of the most devastating things you'll ever see. I rarely feel the urge to rewatch this movie, but the musicality of it, I think, is devastating. I think it reflects a time in Bjork's career as a musician that I think she was at her most interesting. She was making some of her most compelling work ever at this time. Her album Vespertine, I think, came around the same time as well, and I think it's her best album. So she gets to have her cake and eat it too, as both a musician and as a performer on the screen. So really great stuff. Devastating. We'll never watch it again, but I love it.
Okay. Yeah, it is a great movie. I agree. I struggled with where to maybe go for it if I ever had the opportunity because I don't know how much voting appeal there is.
That's my thing. This is sometimes you got to pick a me pick, right? And you got to be a little selfish.
That's
every now
why
and
I
then.
went with Cherbourg. That 100%. I'm totally there with you for sure. Good stuff. Great
so
movie.
good.
Devastating,
So good.
but extremely, extremely good.
Yeah.
All right. My next pick here. I'm going to circle back to Julie Andrews. The Sound of Music.
The Sound of Music.
Going with The Sound of Music. So I don't know if I love this as much as its reputation, but
See, yeah, I know.
it has some very extremely memorable musical numbers though. The performances are very good. And I don't know, maybe it's just top of mind. I just watched The Zone of Interest, and there are some weird
Interesting.
comparisons between the two.
Even the titles kind of sound similar.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Honestly, the same structure.
Yeah.
And they,
Like,
they
yeah.
both kind of tap into a similar-ish theme, despite the execution being polar opposites for sure.
Mhm.
But I don't know. I couldn't help but think of it. I actually have to thank my wife because she watched The Zone of Interest for me. I didn't necessarily want to get into this here now because we'll talk about The Zone of Interest. But the reason that my wife watched that with me is because, again, almost 10 years ago, Under the Skin came out. And it is
Oh, yeah.
one of our favorite experiences together because she absolutely hated Under the Skin.
And that was pretty early in your
Loathed it.
relationship, wasn't it? That almost
Very-
tested the waters enough that you're like, this might not work.
Yeah, she certainly looked at me with a little side eye for sure.
You like this? I don't know if I could date you anymore.
Yeah, it's so we laugh and joke about it all the time. It's still like the pinnacle of like her measurement of if a movie is good or bad. Like, is it? She's always like, is it Under the Skin bad? Like that's always her threshold of the worst is Under the Skin.
I gotta admit, talking to your wife about movies is fun. Because, like, when we were both living in Kentucky, there were times that the three of us went to movies together.
Yeah, for sure.
The three of us
Yeah.
saw Inside Out together. I think we all saw Interstellar together. Didn't we all three see that that Child 44 movie with Tom Hardy? And we're like, oh, this was terrible.
I honestly, yeah, she might have been there. I do remember watching.
I think she met up with us afterwards. I think
Yeah,
the
maybe
movie was
that's what
just
it
you
was.
and I, and then we all
Yeah.
went out to dinner together.
Yeah, but yeah, so Under the Skin is such a unique, it's a fun film for us to joke and laugh and talk
Yeah.
about.
Yeah.
And I, of course, love it. So when I told her about The Zone of Interest, we wanted to experience it together. And to her credit, before I even thought about it, she's like, this reminds me of The Sound of Music. I was like, oh, okay, I kind of see where you're coming from there.
That's it. Now I'm really intrigued by this movie, The Zone of Interest.
So it was top of mind a little bit. I saw that it was available here. And look, it has a massive reputation. So, I mean, I still like it. I just don't love it, I think, as much as a lot of other people do. But I can't deny it's going to have voting appeal here.
I think it will. I don't love it as much as some people do. I love the filmmaking. I love Robert Wise's
Yeah, the
filmmaking. I
craft
love
is great.
the
Yeah.
opening musical number is amazing. I think the movie does get like crushed by its length at times,
agree.
and
No, I
and
agree.
I
Yeah.
don't necessarily love the romance front and center as much. I think it's good, but I think it's at its best when Julie Andrews is just interacting with the children. Like the Do Re Mi scene is amazing. Like it's those little moments like that are very tender and sweet that really sing.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, those moments are fantastic in that film
Yeah,
for sure.
yeah.
Okay, so The Sound of Music.
Yep. So I think it's still
is
you,
right
right? You're
there.
going
So
to
back
your
to
numbers.
me.
Yeah.
And I'm going to the world of animation once again. And this
I knew
might
this was
be
coming. I
solely
knew this was
a
coming.
JD pick. But yes, I'm going with The Nightmare Before Christmas.
That is not a JD pick. That's an everyone pick.
Well, it's interesting because I do think, at least in the cinephile space that we're in, everyone loves this film. I have come to realize I don't think that is really the consensus outside of our world, or at least in the world of Florida in which I live, because
Yeah.
I've found myself in conversations with either friends in the area or the parents of other kids when we're, getting together for kid activities. This film has been brought up, and I just hasn't been the same reception. It's been a little bit more polarizing.
Yeah.
So when we're talking about like a broad voting appeal, of course it's there.
Yeah.
I don't think it's as universal though as something like The Lion King or Beauty and the Beast. But to your point, Brennan, I think for most of the people who will be listening to this and voting, on some level, we all really love this film. And for me, it's one of my very favorite animated films of all time. Up there with The Lion King and Beauty and the Beast. I don't know what it is about animation and musicals. They really ring true for me. So
Well, there's so much, it's the only way that a movie can get away with that kind of magic you see on the Broadway stage. It's through animation, right? That's the closest you can get in cinematic form sometimes.
Yeah.
Now there have obviously been exceptions, and we've talked about some of them already, but it's really difficult to capture that kind of magic. And animation just seems to know how to do it.
Yep. And that's one of the best to ever do it. And it's so unique. It's so different than any other animated film you've seen too. I think that's what's so distinctive about it. It's design. It's so dark and weird, and I love it. And every musical number for me in that film hits hard. Every one of them.
Yeah.
You know, so I watched this, not this Halloween, but last Halloween with the live orchestra. And that was one of my favorite theater experiences ever.
Yeah. Is that good. So?
But love that film.
So good.
At any rate.
So good. So good. All right. Now I have no idea what I'm going to do next. I really don't. This is where it gets difficult. Snaking back around. There are so many of them I love that I know people won't give a crap about. That's the thing. All right. I got to do some quick research here because I've got a list in front of me that I'm actually, you know what? Okay. I'm going to go with this one next. I'm going to go with Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory.
Okay. Yeah, that'll have some appeal. And look, we're doing this with Wonka as the inspiration, so it makes sense.
Someone has to have it. Someone has to have it.
Here. Yeah. Okay.
It's admittedly a film I haven't seen in quite a while, and after seeing Wonka, I was able to pick up on a lot of the ties to it, not just narratively but musically, to the point that it actually made me forget from them. Like, oh yeah, Pure Imagination. I forgot that was from Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory. That song's great. That song is kind of burned into the musical zeitgeist. Yeah. So we have to talk about this. So yeah, Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory. I used to love it as a kid. Haven't seen it in a while, but I know I'll still love it. It's just got that kind of appeal to it. So I'll pick that one for my next one. And then I have my next one being my number 7, my 7th pick here. Oh my gosh. I do not know what to do. Pinocchio.
Oh man, that's definitely on my list as well.
Well, I was thinking, like, I already have a heavy hitter for animation. I already have a heavy hitter for Disney animation. Do I want another one? Yeah, kind of do. Just because they're part of the same studio doesn't mean they have to be compared, right?
Yeah.
So, and you know, you talk about musicals and just the music in general that's kind of burned into the musical zeitgeist. Pinocchio is very much that movie. Every musical number people can still hum to this day. So it's instantaneously memorable and instantaneously famous. So yeah, I'll pick that one. I actually did not expect to pick that one, but then I realized, you know what? Pinocchio, probably my favorite Walt Disney animated film. I got to pick it.
Okay. There you go. Okay. I don't know where to go next. This is
really where it gets fun because
this is really hard.
We still have some heavy hitters here, but I'll admit, JD, there's a few heavy hitters here that I haven't picked yet because I feel like there's still some gray areas as to whether they're really musicals or not. They still kind of fall into like a certain category that it's hard to define. I don't know if you're in that same camp or not. But
I am. No, there's certainly a few here like that I've been debating. Man, let's see here. How do we feel about oh man, I'm struggling here because here's the thing. I have a few that I really want to go with. Maybe some of them fall into that gray area as you're talking about. There's also a few others here that are considered to be some of the best musicals of all time, but I don't think they have any voting appeal, especially to a younger audience.
Yeah.
So it just depends on who's listening and voting here. Obviously, we don't have all of those demographics. So deciding if I was simply doing a ranking, this would be much easier.
Yeah.
What if we go with All That Jazz?
See, that's
How
one
do you
I feel
about it.
that is the big one that I was like, does that qualify by our definition of musical? Because most of it is all performed in a certain,
Yeah,
you know,
I hear you. Yeah, I hear you.
I think we're going to get a lot of people who push back on us if we don't choose to include it. I think
Okay.
we'll get more pushback if we don't include it. So I will say if you do include it, it makes the rest of my list a little bit easier. So I'm going to say go
Okay.
ahead. I'm going to say
All
go
right.
ahead.
All right, I'll go with All That Jazz then.
I think it's a bit more fitting within the musical realm as opposed to some of these other films, like let's say Inside Llewyn Davis.
I agree.
For instance.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, it definitely is more musical adjacent.
Yes, I agree. And when you brought up that you had some films that were in this murky area, that was 100% the film I was thinking about.
I have like 3, and that was one of them.
Okay, and that was one of them. And that was going to be the film I wanted to go with next, but I was also, weirdly, because we share the same brain, I was also having those same thoughts.
Yeah, of course.
But but it is one of those incredible musicals, and it's one that I feel like is appropriate for where we're at in this draft too, because it's so highly regarded.
It is.
It was nominated, won a bunch of awards. I think it won the Palme d'Or in 1980 or whatever year it came out, 1979, something around those times. It was nominated for a bunch of Oscars. It won 3 or 4 of them. I can't recall here off the top of my head, but it's highly regarded. But it doesn't have the same level of accessibility, or perhaps it doesn't have the same ringing endorsement as some of these more popular films we've been talking about.
Yeah, well, it's kind of a dark movie. It's kind of a semi-autobiographical film from Bob Fosse, and it's in many ways it's kind of a deconstructionist musical in some ways.
Yeah, it's a self-portrait.
Yeah.
Him kind of letting go of his own genius in some ways.
Yeah. Yeah.
It does have some interesting, fascinating psychological angles to it that I love, but it's hard to say, here, vote for this.
Yeah.
And I don't think it's just not as widely seen as even something like Pinocchio, for example.
For sure.
So I wanted to wait for it. If you would have picked it in your top 4, I wouldn't have. Like, if you took it the way I took Cherbourg, I would have understood.
Yeah.
But so that's why I was waiting till around this time. And also,
I would have picked
murkiness of it.
Well, I would have picked it earlier if there was more of a clear definition of it being a musical.
Yeah.
If it weren't for that murkiness, but I think we're at a point now where I think we can clearly separate the murkiness of All That Jazz with something like Inside Llewyn Davis, like I mentioned earlier. I think there's more of an argument that All That Jazz is a musical, whereas Inside Llewyn Davis is a music performance film.
Yeah,
and
I would agree with that.
And I think a lot of it maybe comes down to the sense of place, the world that it lives in, the choreography of it. It's not people sitting down with an acoustic guitar just playing songs.
Exactly.
Which is not to undersell Inside Llewyn Davis. It's just a very different vibe.
Exactly.
But it's not a musical vibe.
I agree. So I'm going to go with all that jazz. To get this going, I'm going to go ahead with my next pick here.
All right.
And maybe a little polarizing. It doesn't have the classical sense that some of these others. There's going to be people that love like the 30s, 40s, 50s eras of musicals that are just going to be tearing their hair out. And I understand, because there's a lot from that era that I don't know if it has the voting appeal.
Yeah.
So that's why it's hard for me to go for them at this point.
Gotcha. Okay.
Again, in a personal ranking, this film I'm about to pick would not be as high as it's going to fall here, but I love it still. I love it. I briefly talked about this not that long ago because it is one of my top 10 movies of 2001. and that is Moulin Rouge.
Okay.
Go with
Okay.
a little bit of Moulin Rouge here, because of it's a little bit more time friendly comparatively to the films of the 40s and 50s.
Sure.
Recently we had Baz Luhrmann in the zeitgeist, for better or worse, and I think a lot of people love Moulin Rouge. I think there's a lot of fans for it, and I think there's some voting appeal there. So coming off the heels of some of these others. Again, it's not quite as popular, but I still think there's a lot of love for it. So I'm going with Moulin Rouge here.
Yeah, I knew you were going to pick this one, and I do think it is. I like this movie. I think it's interesting how this is regarded as Baz Luhrmann's, I guess, accessible film, when this film is weird as heck. It's a weird movie.
It's very strange. Yeah.
And I really respect that for it. It's definitely it's Baz going for full Baz, and I appreciate it. I appreciate it on that level. I don't love it as much as you do, but I do think it is a very interesting movie musical.
But that's where its central ideas of love, like it certainly speaks to how universal that is, and how deeply yearning of a feeling it is for all of us when it can come through those weird sensibilities as strongly as it does.
Yeah, for sure.
And that's where, the appeal of that film, for sure.
Yeah. All right, so I guess it's snaking back to me. I've got my number 8 and number 9 slots. So you mentioned With All That Jazz being one of those films that you felt like kind of fell in that murky territory. And I mentioned that I had like 3, including All That Jazz. I'll pick one of those films for my number 8. And I feel like it needs to be selected simply because it's also a Bob Fosse film, and that's Cabaret.
Okay, yeah.
And because in many ways, the fact that it came out when it did, Cabaret was what, 1972, I think it was. And what year was All That Jazz again? That was
79, I think.
That was 79. So in this sense, the fact that we have both films represented in some way kind of represents the yin and the yang of Bob Fosse kind of coming to terms with his own ego, right? On one hand, you pick the film that's him kind of addressing that head on, whereas Cabaret is sort of him still relishing in that. And it's a full-blown interesting movie, and a lot of it really does come down to the central performance by Liza Minnelli, which is just magnetic, absolutely magnetic. So now that we're kind of in that gray area, I'm going to go ahead and pick this one because I feel like it's safe to do so now. So Cabaret, my next pick there at my number 8, and then going to my number 9, I have no idea what I'm going to do next. I kind of feel like being a little bit funny with this one.
Okay.
You know what? Give me a second. Let me just quickly double check something. Am I okay? You know what? I'm okay with this because it's a movie that's tackling a theme that is very topical nowadays. The idea of censorship in movies. So I'm picking South Park, Bigger, Longer, and Uncut.
Wow. Okay.
This is it's a musical, dude. It's a musical.
Yeah.
And I do think the way it tackles censorship is really interesting. I actually think it is. I don't want to say it's profound, but I think it has teeth. It definitely has teeth in what it's saying. And I do appreciate that. And I also just think the film's really funny. I really do. So it might be kind of a me pick. I know South Park isn't quite the same as it was when we were younger, especially in the 90s and early 2000s. But I love the audacity of the makers here to really go for what they were able to get away with, given the censorship laws at that time. So it's a riot. It's a riot. I think this is a very fun movie.
Okay. Wow. I honestly did not see that coming in any way, shape, or form. Okay. Wow. I don't know how to follow that. I don't think I can.
You're welcome.
I know we're running low on time here, so I'm gonna be quick with these next few.
Okay.
The 9th film I'm going to go with here is a Far Cry. And look, for those that love South Park, I am going to disappoint with my next pick here. I'm going with a movie that, a lot of people, when you're looking at this a little bit more pretentiously than something like South Park, This film is often listed, hailed as one of the best musicals of all time.
Yeah.
I haven't seen it in a while. Do love it though. I'm going to go with Judy Garland, Meet Me in St. Louis.
Oh, that's a good one. Yeah.
So I'm going with that one from, what year was that? 1944.
1944.
1944. Going with Meet Me in St. Louis. And it's one of those films too, like it has some musical numbers that a lot of people have probably heard, even if they don't know where it came from.
Sure.
It's one of those movies. It does have music that you're familiar with. And so it does have a lingering effect in that regard. So I'm going to go with Meet Me in St. Louis. And then for my last one, I debated this, but I'm going to do it anyway. I am going to go with La La Land.
I was waiting for that. This one scared me. I wanted to pick this one earlier because I do think it's a very good film. But will the Moonlight fans come after you?
Well, and it is, honestly, it's a little bit of a risk. I do agree. However, I feel a little safer that it's my 10th selection here. So I made it all the way to the end. I do think if I'm looking at this more objectively than just, hey, we're doing a ranking here, maybe there's some subjective weird picks that we want to throw in there. I think it's one of the best musicals we've seen in a long time. I certainly like it much better than something like Chicago.
Oh, yeah.
It's film. It's crafted in a way that evokes what is so great about a lot of these musicals we've been talking about, where so much is in camera. It's inventive. The music, I think, is genuinely very good. The performances are great. You might not have wanted them to win Oscars, and that's fine. That's a different conversation, but they're great. They're great. So much of the backlash against La La Land, and we've talked this to death, is it simply comes down to that. It simply comes down to the awards of it all. It was nominated for 14 Oscars. People were clearly overwhelmed by that, and they wanted Moonlight or something else to win. They didn't want Ryan Gosling to win or Emma Stone. Of course, for Best Picture, everyone was going for Moonlight, which is why we have a T-shirt of it.
Yeah.
So, I honestly, if awards did not exist, I don't think anyone would have that much of an issue with La La Land.
Probably not.
I think it really just kind of comes down to that. So when we remove that from the conversation and we're just talking about the craft of the film, musicals like La La Land just don't get made these days.
No, they don't.
They're crafted more in the style of Chicago, and Chicago has a little bit of an extravagance to it, but it is edited to hell. And not in a way that I find appealing at all.
Oh yeah, because what makes Chicago the musical, like the original show, is that choreography, right? And the way that movie is edited, it masks so much of that.
Yeah, I can't with that film. So
I'm with you.
And a lot of films have used that as a blueprint. A lot of other musicals have followed the Chicago blueprint, and it's made what could be a great musical there, all the more mundane to me. It's another reason why something like Annette, which is a film that I love, I wouldn't have ever voted for because me and 6 other people love that movie. But Annette follows the La La Land thing of where it's unique, it's different, it's not the Chicago formula at all.
Yeah.
So those two are, as far as I'm concerned, the best modern musicals. And so I'm going to champion La La Land. I know the Moonlight champions might push back against me a little bit, but I'm not here to talk about awards. I'm here to just talk about what I think are some of the best musicals of all time. And honestly, I think La La Land belongs in that conversation. I really do.
I do as well. The only reason why I didn't pick it is because I was wondering if there would be pushback. Because of that reputation,
fair.
And that's not the film's fault. It's not the film's fault.
I agree.
And I really like the film as well. In my revamped top 10 list of 2016, I don't know if it quite makes my top 10 anymore, but it's definitely still in my top 20. But 2016 was just such a strong year. That was a very strong year overall, much like many years from the past decade. But that one in particular was pretty effective for me personally. So to see it get knocked down out of my top 10 is not really a reflection on the film. It's more so a reflection on how other films from that year just rose for me with time. But I do think La La Land is just as far as the sheer craft is concerned, I don't think you can really overlook that one. It needs to be in the conversation here. I have no idea what to pick for my last pick. I really don't. This might be a portion of the show where there might be some awkward silence as I just try to, just because I've got at least like 10 or so I could pick that I wouldn't lose sleep over, but I need to round this out with like, what's the one to go with? Like, what have I not represented here that should be represented?
I don't know how you're going to top South Park.
I'm not. I imagine if I picked that one first instead of Singing in the Rain.
I would have been really shocked. It would have been funny given how we started this conversation.
Yeah. I feel like I might need to have something here from director George Cukor here. I think I'm going to go with the 1954 version of A Star Is Born.
Oh, okay. There you go.
Yeah. And yeah, specifically the 1954 version with Judy Garland. Yeah, because I feel like the narrative is of all four of these versions, it's this one and the Bradley Cooper film that are sort of seen as the two premier versions of this story. It's been remade like 17,000 times, but I do think this is one of the better ones, and I think Judy Garland's amazing in it. I know we're low on time, so I'll leave it at that. It's a classic story that everyone knows, so that'll round out my 10.
Okay, well there it is. Let's go ahead and recap our 10 films once again. So my 10, I have The Wizard of Oz, The Umbrellas of Cherbourg, The Beauty and the Beast, West Side Story 1961, The Sound of Music, The Nightmare Before Christmas, All That Jazz, Moulin Rouge, Meet Me in St. Louis, and everyone's favorite La La Land.
Yes,
rounds out
favorite.
my 10.
And mine are Singing in the Rain, The Lion King, The Rocky Horror Picture Show, Mary Poppins, Dancer in the Dark, Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory, Pinocchio, Cabaret, South Park Bigger, Longer, and Uncut, and A Star Is Born from 1954.
Okay.
Still quite a few we didn't get a chance to mention here, JD. Like quite a few.
Yeah, absolutely.
I almost picked My Fair Lady. Almost went with Fiddler on the Roof.
Yep.
Rocket Man is not a bad one. Purple Rain, I almost went with. But that kind of fell in that fell into that that gray area. I wrote it down here because I know it's a fairly popular film, but I hate Grease. I cannot stand Grease.
Yeah, that's another one I wrote down for its popularity.
Yeah.
Swing Time is another one I had on here that I
Top
considered. Top Hat, yeah. I just, again, the popularity of those isn't there with The Sound of Music. But if you take a step back and you look at it more of like from the lens of best, those are often in the conversation. So it's hard to say, but
yeah. I will say also on my list, I think Sweeney Todd is kind of underrated.
I like Sweeney Todd.
I like that one a bit. I think it's actually one of Tim Burton's better films. It's probably his best film, like of the later era Burton films.
Especially
like,
post 2000 for sure.
It's the best Burton film where he's clouded by CGI.
Yeah. I think that's very fair.
Yeah.
I do like it as well. At any rate, that's our musicals draft. We're going to put these lists out on Twitter as we did with Nicolas Cage. So be on the lookout for that. Cast a vote for which team you think is better. You can also just hit us up separately on social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. Or if you're watching on YouTube, leave a comment below. Do you like Brendan's list better or mine? Simply do that as well. Be sure to subscribe to the channel while you're at it, like the video, all that jazz.
Nice.
All of that.
Nice. I saw where you were going with that.
Thank you. If you're listening on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, please rate and review us there. It really helps out the show. If you want to email us in long form, insessionfilm@gmail.com.
Yeah.
Women in Session, they have a new episode out right now talking about Brendan Fraser. That was a lot of fun, so go and check that out.
The best Brendan of all time.
There you go. Want a quick note. So actually, a couple of quick notes. We have 3 reviews coming out later this week.
Yes.
That you want to be on the lookout for, including American Fiction, which we talked about earlier, WONKA, and we're also going to talk about the foreign language film Fallen Leaves. So be on the lookout for that. And then also we have a date for the In Session Film Awards.
Yes. Tentative, because it could always change.
Exactly. It could always change, but we're planning to record those January 7th and 8th. Which means they'll come out, probably the 8th and 9th, respectively. That's when you'll get them to your earbuds. So,
yes,
and we will be for that.
And we will be joined by some familiar faces. For that.
We'll have some familiar guests here for sure.
Yeah.
So be on the lookout for all of that. But I at least wanted to lay the groundwork there because the In Session Film Awards is about a month away, which is very exciting. So
I know. Lots of homework to still do
out there. But yeah, stay tuned for all of those reviews coming out later this week. Anything else before we get out of here, Brennan? I think that's about it.
I think it's about it, but shameless plug if you don't mind. We just got done talking about musicals, so keeping to the music theme, my band released a new album. It's out. Yeah, I'm showing it on YouTube right
Look at
now.
That. How cool.
Yeah, Two Rocks Ride, Back to Shine. Yes, we're still doing CDs because we think we live in the wrong era, honestly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's 2003 for Brendan.
Apparently CDs are making a comeback. Vinyl records made a comeback, and now CDs are making a comeback as well, from what I understand.
What about the cassette tapes? Because Amazon sent me a cassette tape for
the
air promotion.
Those are coming back. No, they're actually coming back.
They?
Yeah. There will be a slight resurgence of them, if I'm going to predict honestly. And I think a lot of it is because most people can't play it. It's just the idea of having something retro and vintage on hand. And I think the idea of it's kind of like the same argument for physical media when it comes to movies, right? Yeah. The idea of physical media for music, people are realizing that it's part of the art. Like when you buy a vinyl record and you open it up, it's like you're getting this beautiful package that's part of the music. And cassette tapes and CDs are kind of part of that. So that's why I think we're seeing a resurgence there. But I don't know. We would love to do cassettes. We would love to do vinyl, but they're too expensive. They're too expensive to manufacture.
I was going to say, if you get a cassette, I'll take one because I got a brand new cassette player. For me, it's 1995 all over again.
I was going to say, do you have that Walkman from Home Alone 2?
I mean, they sent me one. I got the whole thing. So
that's amazing.
I'll have to bust it out for the next show. But
okay, yeah. I guess we got to do cassettes next. Yeah, we're just still doing CDs. But there might be more physical media in the future. Yeah, the official album comes out this Friday as we're recording this, so you'll see it on all of the streaming services there. So follow Two Rocks Rye. Follow some. Hopefully it's music you appreciate, but just wanted to do a shameless plug there.
Yeah, we'll definitely go and check that out for sure. Yeah. Get your Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 4K Blu-ray. Pretty cool to be on the cover. So definitely go and get that as well. With that, that'll do it for this week's show. Thanks for listening, everybody. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time on the In Session Film Podcast. Oh, man. The Globes got it right for once. It's hard to believe.
They did.